Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, February 23rd. Thank you for tuning into the Wisdom Worth Knowing live stream podcast. I am your host, Craig Chamberlain, and today's topic that was selected by the community is your circle should want to see you win. Your circle should clap the loudest when you have good news. If they don't, get a new circle. Sounds like a very interesting topic for today. Actually, I really like this one, like the ones you guys usually choose before this. If it's the first time tuning in, basically the way the show works is we dig into the topic for the first 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes of the show. And then we move into a discussion time on the live stream. You could tune into the discussion time or leave your comments at Facebook or YouTube. Those are the chat streams that are monitored. And feel free to tune in at any point there and leave your comments. I apologize if I seem like I'm on a delay this morning. I have a routine physical blood work this morning, and I couldn't have my usual morning coffee. And as you guys know, it's 6 a.m. when we start doing the broadcasting, and I'm not used to being up this early without any coffee or caffeine of any kind. So bear with me if my brain seems somewhat delayed or lagging this morning. That's going to be an adjustment for me. But I'm looking forward to about 8:20 a.m. when I get to have my first cup of coffee. If you haven't checked out Audible yet, the show is currently sponsored by Audible, where listening is the new reading. An audiobook service. You can get a free 30-day subscription and one audiobook for free at audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. That's audible, audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. Tune in there for that free deal and get your first audiobook free. Try out your audiobooks. I always recommend starting with something you've never tried before. Wow, this morning's going to be so bad for me. I always recommend starting with a book you've already read that you know you're a fan of. Then check the reviews and kind of experience the book in a different way. But if you're like me, you're really busy. You don't have time to read books as often as you would like, and it's a good opportunity. It's a good compromise. That's audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. Also, make sure you like, share, and subscribe on whatever service you're listening on, because that definitely helps build the show. And we are on pretty much every service you can think of. We are on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, and we are also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. So let's go ahead and move into the topic. Your circle should want to see you win. Your circle should clap loudest when you have good news. If they don't, get a new circle. So I do know that immediately I have some reservations about that last final solution they have in the quote, but I get where they're going with this. I'm not generally a fan of absolutism, where there's a singular solution to every problem people have. So when you say things like, if they don't get a new circle, I feel like that is a broad stroke solution to an obvious problem. I do know that the problem they're pointing out is a problem. You know, if you are surrounded by people who are not, in a lot of ways, what they're saying is not celebrating you in some way, or at least celebrating your successes, that's not good. I mean, in the downside of this, like I said, the absolutism of it is not necessarily the best, but there's a quote that I heard from Candace Owens. I don't know if this quote is something she came up with or what, but she did say that you become the net average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I really kind of thought about that. I'm like, that is profound. You know, and she followed it up with saying, so if you become the net average of the people you spend the most time with, the 5 people you spend the most time with, she said, make sure you're spending it with people who are helping you average up. Now, that's a good thing to kind of sit down and think about our close circle of friends. Like who are the top 5 people we spend the most time with? And then we have to decide, when we spend the time with those people, if those people are good for our growth. We talk a lot about boundaries on this show and setting healthy boundaries and kind of cultivating healthy relationships that can grow. And boundaries are kind of that fence you put up that shows kind of where you end and they begin. You'll have healthy boundaries with people. And we set up that fence in order so we can grow properly. And then if you kind of take that logic further, when it comes to your circle, I don't think it's always healthy to surround yourself only with people who agree with you. But this doesn't really imply people who agree with you. So I think that's the first trap when it says surround yourself with people who want to see you win. First, you have to define what winning is. Like we have to sit down and decide what kind of person do we want to become? What kind of person do we want to be? And that's hard work. That takes time. That's something we have to cultivate. That's not something we just wake up one morning and we know exactly where we want to be. I do know self-authoring and journaling are great ways of kind of getting to that point. That helps me a lot. Kind of sitting down and visualizing. I'm a huge fan of visualization, where you are kind of picturing yourself, literally picturing yourself where you want to be. And that may be just sitting there closing your eyes and just envisioning yourself to the best of your ability on where you want to be today, where you want to be tomorrow, where you want to be in a week, a month, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And then you use that visualization process to kind of set up what your definition of winning is. Like, what is winning to you? Is it becoming financially independent? Is it getting in a stable relationship? Is it taking care of yourself better? Is it taking care of others around you better? Is it building character? Becoming a better human being? Is it a combination of a lot of these things? And based on all of those criteria, I mean, what does that look like for you? And I emphasize, what does that look like for you? Because the only person we really have any intimate knowledge of is ourselves. The only one we can define these things for is ourselves. Of course, it's important to be realistic and give ourselves grace in this process of growth. But then once we've kind of sat down and decided where we want to be, the next question is, are we in an environment? Do we have a circle that would be conducive to that growth? Setting those, not only setting, but accomplishing those goals. Or are we in a group of people who will not only help us average down, but are we in a group of people who will not support us if we make the move toward that? Like if we decide we want to be sober, for example, are we with a group of people who will not only make fun of us, but resent us and sabotage us in that process of that being our goal? That's an obvious one. I use addiction a lot on the show because I feel like that's an obvious thing that, first of all, it's a thing a lot of people struggle with. And second of all, it's an obvious, like, who are people here? It has an obvious consequence, right? If you fail, I mean, you fall into it, right? So I use that a lot, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be any goal you're trying to accomplish. Having a group of people who will be conducive to accomplishing your definition of winning, not only just accepting of you, but celebrating you getting there. And we do have a tendency right now of being an envious culture, so we envy each other when we do well, and I think this envy comes naturally. Jealousy. What doesn't come naturally is looking at somebody who's successful and celebrating them. That's like a cancer of our culture right now. Is we look at people, and maybe there's always been a group of people who've looked at people who are successful and torn them down. There's two things successful people do to people. The first thing is they remind them of their lack of success. So that makes people angry. The second thing successful people do to people is they prove to them that it can be done, whatever it is that they're successful at. And some people just don't like that. They don't like being reminded that they could be as successful. They have the potential. People would prefer to think they are hopeless so that they can do whatever they want whenever they want, in my experience. So successful people tend to remind others of their inadequacy in that respect, where they wanted to believe it wasn't even possible to accomplish it. That way they could just be comfortable with with never getting there. And then another thing it does is the lie of success is it appears a lot of successful people, it just came naturally to them and they woke up one morning and they accomplished that, especially in social media culture where people edit. That's just not true. I don't know any people who are successful at the things that they do without the work. Diet is an obvious example of this. Diet and being in shape. People look at famous people who are in shape. Now, granted, they have the advantage at that point at that stage of their lives where a lot of people who are already famous, they're at a stage in their life in which they have the free time conducive to taking better care of your body and health. But there are plenty of people who sure, they don't become supermodels or they don't become super ripped. Some people do, because they've got full-time jobs and they can't get there. So you have to be realistic about that. But there are plenty of people who are successful in these areas with full-time jobs. They find a way to make it work. And so, like I said, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for me to look at people who are in really good shape. I mean, I've lost, in the last year, I have lost about 35 pounds because I've been pretty aggressive on my diet because I put on a lot of weight. Not this last Christmas, but the Christmas before last. It's a lot of work. I mean, it's not easy losing weight. It requires a tremendous amount of discipline, pain, suffering, sacrifice. And it's not helpful to be around people who are trying to shove a bunch of unhealthy food in your face, or when you start losing weight, they get mad at you or jealous of you, or they make fun of you. You know, like that doesn't help, those types of things. So the second part of that quote is your circle should clap loudest when you have good news. In other words, not only should you surround yourself with people who are conducive to that growth, they don't tolerate your growth, but you find people who will celebrate your growth, who you'll tell, hey, I was able to do that. I lost a pound this week. And they're not apathetic about it, you know. They actually say, oh, that's awesome. Good job. It is so easy to tear somebody down. It is arguably the default condition. Our default condition is to fall apart. It's to not have ourselves together. It's just to exist. Like that is our default condition. And really our goal should always be not to be the default, right? Our goal should be to be moving always toward getting ourselves back together, you know, bringing ourselves together. And if we fall apart, we just keep picking up the pieces and trying to put ourselves back together, you know, to try to move toward the assembly of ourselves. Move toward, to quote Peterson, move away from chaos and toward order. And we have to be intentional about that migration. You know, we can't just wake up one morning and every piece is suddenly in place. And I don't even think there'll ever be a time in which we all do have it all together. But being surrounded by people who are supporters of you getting yourself together is arguably essential. Because we're social creatures and people around us impact us, their attitudes, their reactions. And this is true for social media too. I mean, are we surrounding ourselves with what's the word I'm looking for here? Are we wading in murky and disgusting waters expecting to get clean, you know? Are we frequenting fast food restaurants as our hangouts when we're trying to get in shape? It's not just people. Social media, are we following people on social media who celebrate failure and weakness as strength? It's very easy to do. Look, there's an experiment that you guys can try. I know I talk about audiobooks, and I guess this is a good plug for this, is if you haven't tried Audible audiobooks, with Audible, listening is the new reading. And right now for a limited time, you can get a free 30-day trial with Audible. That's at audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. That's Audible, audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. You sign up now, you get a 30-day trial and your first audiobook free. And the reason I allude to that is because we can surround ourselves with people who are experts in whatever area we want to improve, and audiobooks are a great way to do that. And so are podcasts. Not to shamelessly plug this podcast, but don't listen to mine. I mean, listen to mine if you like it, but if you're looking to be successful in an area, just plugging in an audiobook for 30 minutes a day and listening to somebody who's mastered that area you're trying to get better at, having that environment conducive to that growth, or creating an environment conducive to that growth, helps immensely. Just try that as an experiment. Like 30 minutes a day spend with someone in an audiobook who has what you want. Kind of see how that remolds your mind. I think the media understands this, the success of propaganda better than we do. We like to think these things don't affect us, but regular exposure to the same messaging over and over again does actually, it sinks in unconsciously. It does affect us, and it can affect us in a positive way. We can use that to our advantage. So we can follow people on social media. That's one circle we have. We can listen to only certain shows and podcasts that kind of move us in that direction, or at least spend most of our time listening to those that are conducive to our growth. And then we can surround ourselves physically with the people who will celebrate our growth. And now, before I wrap this up and move into discussion time, I do want to stop and take the time to move into that last part where it says, if they don't, get a new circle. Your circle should want to see you win. Your circle should clap loudest when you have good news. If they don't, get a new circle. We need to be careful with cutting people out. We need to value our relationships. There's a temptation now and a tendency toward just cutting people out of our lives if we don't agree with them or they kind of make us mildly uncomfortable. And it's important not to fall into the trap with this one, that you are surrounding yourself with a circle of people who agree with you. Because the quote is, your circle should want to see you win, not your circle should agree with you. These are two completely different things. In many cases, the people who want to see you win will not agree with you, because the people who want to see you win will have the courage to help you get to those goals, assuming they've been communicated to them. And so if you're falling off the path that you want to be on, and they know the path you want to be on, sometimes the circle of friends will actually come in and say, hey man, I thought you wanted to, get in better shape. I'm not saying they're like complete jerks about it, but they may occasionally bring it up. Or maybe they'll just be polite about it. Like, hey, how's that going? They'll check in on some way. And I get it. Making friends is hard. Keeping friends is hard. But if you're in a situation in which the people closest to you are causing negative growth, it's a danger to think that it does not affect you. Because it's so easy to fail. Like, it is so easy to fall apart. Or especially when you're first starting to try to make a change, or first trying to cultivate the habit, it is so easy to just say, you know what, this was a terrible idea. I'm just gonna not do this. It's so easy to do. And sometimes it only takes like one person saying, you know what, why bother? And then you're like, you know what, yeah, why bother? And then you have to start the whole process over again. So it is important, though, not to just completely cut people off and abandon them either. So that's definitely something you want to consider when you're looking into this situation of how impactful and how important and how positive your circle might be or might not be. So yeah, before we move into the discussion time, let me tell you again about Audible. If you're like me and you love reading or even the idea of reading, but don't have the time because you have a partner, kids, full-time jobs, or crazy time-consuming hobby, and then I have good news for you. Wow, this no caffeine thing's killing me. With Audible, listening is the new reading. You can pop in those earbuds and play that next exciting adventure or expand your knowledge right from your Android or Apple device. And now for a limited time, you can get your first audiobook completely free. Just visit audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. That's Audible, audible.wisdomworthknowing.org right now and take advantage of a free 30-day trial. More than enough time to finish that first book. If you are dissatisfied for any reason, you can cancel anytime. That is audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. And if you have not yet subscribed, make sure you check us out on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. If you want to connect to that easily, just go to the website, wisdomworthknowing.org, and there are direct links, at the very least, to the Apple and Google Podcast networks and Spotify. So you can just join right through there. You can also actually listen to the entire podcast directly on wisdomworthknowing.org, so you don't have to join any of those services. You can actually just listen straight through the website. And it does not appear we're getting a whole lot of activity on the chat this morning. Like I said, that's completely normal. First of all, it's a Wednesday, middle of the week. And my regulars have been amazingly committed, and I appreciate them stopping by quite a bit. And it being 6 o'clock in the morning, East Coast, most normal people are not up this early. So not a problem at all on there not being a whole lot with the live chat this morning. So let me go ahead and before I close, I'll go ahead and reiterate kind of what we discussed and see if there's anything new I can add. Quote, your circle should want to see you win. Your circle should clap the loudest when you have good news. If they don't, get a new circle. I think we've pretty much covered everything on this. Your circle should want to see you win. We know that we want to make sure we evaluate, we set goals, we decide where we want to be, so that we know what winning looks like for us. And then we need to sit back and see if we are surrounding ourselves with a circle, whether that be our immediate circle of friends and family, and then that expands out to our social media circle of influence, and then expanding that even out further to our informational circle, podcasts, books, things that will help continue to create that environment so that we can grow. And then once we've kind of evaluated those three circles and said, you know, this person might be really good for me, this person maybe not. And you don't need to completely cut people out. You can just kind of, like say, maybe I shouldn't spend as much time, with this person, at least for a while until I can start getting where I want to be. And then after you've evaluated that, kind of set that goal, impacted your circle, you can kind of start making those moves toward hopefully accomplishing whatever goal it is you're trying to accomplish. And hopefully they celebrate you so that you can continue to average up. I know this isn't a super popular topic. People don't like to talk about the possibility that the people they surround themselves with and the things and the entertainment they surround themselves with. Music is a dangerous one too. Like think about the type of music you listen to. I'm not for censorship or anything, but I am a big fan of self-censoring because there are certain musicians or movies that I watch that just put my head in the wrong place. And that's just me. Maybe it's not you. Maybe you're not as affected by it, but I swear that stuff sinks in. So if we're listening to stuff that just isn't really good for us, it might be a good idea, at least temporary, to cut it out to see if that helps. It's just good to kind of reinforce, especially when you're trying to move forward. Like I said, it's just so much easier to fall apart than it is to kind of pull yourself together and to stay in that positive growth process. It's so much easier to fall apart. It just is. And we're going to fail. So I guess I should throw that in there, that we are not going to be perfect at this. This is a skill, creating a group or a circle of positive influence for ourselves. It is a skill. Making friends is not easy at all. Having healthy relationships with people is not easy, and it's not it's not all within our control. Isolating is also not healthy, so having a circle is more important than no circle at all in most cases. And yeah, I think that's good. I think your circle should want to see you win. I think that's good advice. It's a good quote. And if you guys have not followed the show at all yet, and you aren't quite sure how this discussion time thing works, it's just right on Facebook and YouTube, and the live chat goes live as soon as the stream goes live, and then the comments actually you just post the comments there, and I monitor that during the live stream. So I want to thank you all for stopping by today. I appreciate all of your support, and until next time, remember, your circle should want to see you win. Your circle should clap the loudest when you have good news. If they don't, get a new circle. My name is Craig Chamberlain. You've been listening to the Wisdom Worth Knowing live stream podcast. And tomorrow, I will see you around 6 a.m. And until then, make sure you are working toward being the best version of yourself you can today. And I'm going to try to be the best version of myself that I can today. Because that's the best we can do. We can only really compare ourselves to ourselves. And it's the only healthy way to do it. And the hope is that every day we are making steps toward being a better version of ourselves. So have a wonderful morning. Get after it today. And I will see you all tomorrow.